Tuesday the 12th of January. We're now on chapter 5 of Monster Slayer. Quick recap. Grendel is living in the Great Hall. Everybody's absolutely scared of him, and Beowulf, our friend Beowulf, has come in his rather magnificently fierce boat to see if he can rid them of the monster. Chapter 5, When Shadows Bled into Shadows. What a gruesome title. Beowulf stood at the door of the hall as night fell and looked out at the deserted village. Deserted means there's nobody there. And he looked out at the deserted village. The place was as silent as death. Nothing stirred. Stirred means moved. Nothing moved, nothing stirred. The light retreated. Retreated means ran away. The light retreated and the shadows thickened. They crept out of the forest and across the marshland like severed fingers and poked Grendel awake. That's a bit crazy. The monster rose from his nest among the putrid means rotting, the putrid pools. The monster rose from his nest among the putrid pools, put out his lizard-like tongue and tasted the night. He crooned, that means sang, he crooned his vile, horrid song. And he's singing because he's using inverted commas. Sweet human meat's the best to eat, and human bones the best to grind. Human blood will flow again, and terror haunt the human mind. Mwahaha. When his song was done, Grendel sniffed the air for human blood. Then once again he set off for the great hall. Now Beowulf was the most powerful warrior on earth, stronger than any other man, and he was no fool. He had heard how strong and cunning means crafty, he had heard how strong and cunning Grendel could be, and knew he had to be both to match him. He must unsettle Grendel. Unsettle means put him off. He must put off Grendel. He must unsettle Grendel. What am I going on about? He understood that the best fighters keep their wits, that means brains, about them at all times. He must make Grendel so furious and blind with rage that the monster would make a fatal, deadly mistake. Beowulf took off his sword and put it aside. He knew from the many tales he'd heard that swords were useless on the monster's skin. Oh, have I missed a page? I think I have. When shadow bled into shadow, Grendel came from the marshy swamps. Out of the mists and fogs, the monster made his way to the great hall. He came to the massive door and tried to push it open, as he had done night after night, year after year. But the door was locked and bolted. He was furious that the villagers could have done such a thing after so long. He hammered on the oak planks with his bare fists and smashed it in. as if it were no more substantial than a wren's nest. A wren is a very tiny bird. As Grendel entered, his awful shadow filled the great hall. His anger grew and grew when he saw that humans had dared to enter before him and fill the place with candles. The hall's great beams flickered in the light, and cobwebs hung down like freakish decorations. Between the groups of candles were great pools of darkness. Why had they done this? For what possible reason? For a moment, the monster's mind clouded over, and he stood, rock still and puzzled. This gave time for Beowulf to study his enemy. He stayed hidden among the shadows, but he picked a tiny pebble from the floor and tossed it at Grendel. Grendel turned, his ears alert to the faintest sound. "What's that?" he bellowed. "A mouse," Beowulf whispered. "What mouse is it that smells of human blood and talks with a human tongue?" Oops. "The mouse that will devour you," Beowulf whispered. In silence, Beowulf climbed up onto the rafters roof above the hall, and while Grendel stomped about below, he tossed another pebble. "What's that?" Grendel roared. "An owl," Beowulf whispered. Ooh, got some pictures here. Skinny rat. "What owl is it that smells of human blood and talks with a human tongue?" "The owl that will devour you." Devour means gobble. "You," said Beowulf. And then Beowulf dropped from the rafters. Spooky owls. Oops, hands on the floor. The talk of owls and mice had confused the monster, and he was full of anger that he had been taunted, that means horribly teased. And so when Beowulf dropped down beside him, he caught him unawares. Beowulf gripped Grendel's arm, and Grendel cried out in surprise. The feel of Beowulf's strong grip was alien to him, was strange to him, was alien to him. Nothing on earth or in the supernatural world had been a threat to him before. He had been the most dangerous thing in the world for hundreds of years. Now Grendel spun around, flung out his arm, and threw Beowulf off balance. But in a moment, Beowulf was back. His fist smashed Grendel's jaw and scattered his teeth like black pearls. As the warrior and the monster rolled on the floor of the great hall, first one, then the other had the upper hand. Grendel clawed at Beowulf's face till Beowulf was blinded by his own blood. But still he clung to the demon, crushing its neck with the power of 30 men. In the fury of the fight, the great hall was destroyed. The great table was smashed to smithereens and splinters stuck in Beowulf and Grendel's flesh. Human and monster blood was sprayed across the scarred walls, and still neither man nor monster gave in. Then the moment of victory came. There was a sound like the cracking of a branch, and the bone in Grendel's right arm snapped. For the first and only time, he tasted defeat. That means he lost. He bellowed. Oops, in my socks. He bellowed, that means shouted out. He bellowed with despair and wiped the blood from his eyes to look for the door and escape. But Beowulf held his good arm in a grip no man on earth could break or stand. And the monster howled in agony as he struggled to free himself. Agony means great pain. At last, with a final cry, Grendel managed to drag himself free. He staggered out of the hall, leaving behind him a river of blood. In his fury, that means anger, in his fury to escape, his arm had been torn off and left in Beowulf's iron-like grip. Beowulf looked at it in horror and flung it away. Not surprised, how grim. Back across the marshy swamp, the monster stumbled into the mists and fogs. Soon he was home, and as the last flickering of life faded from him, he sank down into the lake by the foul marsh. Down he sank, deeper and deeper, into the stinking depths, dying as he reached the very place of his birth. And in that secret place, an even greater monster waited.